All right, perfect. I'm going to get started here. Again, thanks for joining the call today. My name is Mike Hemmert. I run the sales team at AssetMap. The goal today, I'm going to run you through kind of the high level of what AssetMap does. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through some slides here, just kind of touch on the key features. I'll talk about the history of AssetMap, kind of how people use our tool. And then I'll pivot into the live application and kind of show you how it works in real time. Um, so again, if I were to start my conversation with Asset Map, I think one of the things that's helpful is just kind of talk about like, what is it and how did it start? And what are some of the benefits of the tool? So how we started, we were started by an advisor. Adam Holt is the CEO of Asset Map. And if you ever heard Adam speak, he would say he's a recovering financial planner. He was 25 years as a financial planner. And the start of Asset Map, it wasn't always software. It was just Adam's process. And Adam worked for a large broker dealer, a couple thousand advisors. And at the age of 31, he ended up becoming one of the top 50 advisors at the company. So they invite him to the top advisor meeting. And since he was 31 years old, he was the youngest person in the room. They'd asked him, like, hey, why don't you just get up there and tell everybody what you're doing? I think they'd like to hear a perspective from someone that's 31 doing so well. So Adam went up and he talked about his process. Again, Asset Map wasn't software at the time. It was just Adam's process. And he goes through and does his presentation in front of the advisors. Then the presentation ends. And after the presentation, about 2 dozen of the advisors came up to him and said, hey, I'm kind of sort of doing what you're doing. Can I take your process? And Adam said, sure, no problem. You can take my process. So he gave him the process. And then fast forward a year later, Adam saw how well those advisors were doing and they accredited his process. That's when he had the idea is like, maybe my process is something more than just my process. And then ended up selling his business to his partners. At the time, they had about 1,600 clients, just north of $1 billion under management, and he started AssetMap. So that's kind of really why Adam started AssetMap. And when Adam was in practice and he asked, what were the problems that he faced every day? Um, he couched it as three separate problems, but they're all related. The first problem Adam noticed was he just called it the time to credibility. And that was when he met with someone for the first time. The time it took him to build enough credibility to start delivering advice, it was taking too long. He's like, how can I make it quicker? In his practice, if he brought on a new client before he started Asset Map, he would send someone fact finder, hey, fill this out, bring in your statements, and bring your spouse or partner into the first meeting. And in the first meeting, Adam would talk about who they are, what they do, and how they do it. And then he's had to set another meeting 2 to 4 weeks later to actually start delivering advice. He wanted to find a way. He's like, can I start that like in the first meeting? Can I start delivering advice and get enough credibility in that first meeting to have an advice conversation? The second issue he had is this complexity issue, and it's related to the first problem. After that first meeting, he'd take a bunch of information that someone gave him, and he'd have to put it into a piece of software. And there was two problems there. The first problem, the time it took him or someone in his on his team to put enough information into a piece of software to spit something out that was useful. That was daunting. The other issue he had is when he finally got those reports from whatever software he was using, and he put it in front of a client, sometimes he would see a client would just gloss over. It was just too confusing, and they would shut down. So Adam's like, I got to find a better way of taking these complex things, whether it be tax or investments, and make it more simple. And then the third problem he had, and again, it's related to the first two, it was the time to build credibility to deliver advice and the time it took him and the complex reports out there. What Adam found was not all of his clients were getting the same advice experience. So these people in the front of the line were getting a different experience in the back of the line just because it wasn't scalable. He was trying to find like, how can I make this scalable? So those are the problems that Adam faced when he was in practice, and what was the genesis of Asset Map. The other thing I'll talk about is just when the people that use our software. So again, the places we're doing business, we do business with certainly people that are in wealth management, whether they're an RIA, they work for a broker dealer, a bank, or a credit union. We also do business in the family office space. We have accountants, CPAs using our software, estate planning attorneys are using it. And for those folks that use our software, when we ask them, like, when are you using it? Um, Most of them will tell us it's actually when they're meeting, when they're face to face with the client. It's not necessarily a back office tool for them. It's something when they're meeting with clients. So those moments, we call them the moments of opportunity. The first when you're first meeting someone, that initial get to know you piece. If you use Asset Map properly, it's just a good way to ask questions that doesn't feel like an interrogation or having the client have a bunch of homework where they have to fill out a bunch of paperwork for you. The second moment we see is when they're actually making a recommendation or they're delivering advice. Again, whether that be tax advice or investment advice, planning advice. And then the third moment is ongoing meetings, so the ongoing engagement when they're doing meeting reviews. That's when we see our users are using Asset Map. Just some other things about Asset Map. Again, I share this with you. Just some of the awards we won. Our message is growing virally. We're growing almost 40% year over year over the last few years. These are some of the awards we won. G2, we're the highest rated financial wellness tool. For those of you in wealth management, if you're familiar with the T3 conference, at one point we were the highest rated, fastest growing planning tool, but we don't necessarily consider ourselves a planning tool. And then wealthmanager.com, the category we fit in best was called specialized planning. So now let me pivot over, and I'm just going to touch on some of the key features of Asset Map, and then I'll get into the tool and show you how it works live. So again, just one of the first things we hear about is like, how do I get started in Asset Map? So there's a couple ways to get data into our system. Obviously, manually, you can put data in the system. There's a discovery process. So if I was going to meet with you next week and you wanted to get a little bit of information from me in advance of the first meeting, you can send me an email and send me through a discovery process. And the third way is just integrations. So some of our integration partners, for those of you in wealth management, things like Redtail or Nitrogen, we have ways of getting data into our system. Morningstar would be another one. The discovery process, again, the use case is I'm coming to meet with you next week. You need to get a little bit of information from me in advance of the first meeting. We give everybody a custom QR code. If you actually took your phone out and took a picture of that, you could go through our discovery process. Or you can just send me an email. So in that case, you send me an email, I open up the email, and what we're seeing here is that experience on there. The discovery process, we want to try to do it in 15 minutes. If it takes any more than that, we know most people will abandon. So there's no login. It's all tied to their email address. Things we want to know, who they are, members, entities in their household. They can be as specific as they want. So for example, they can just tell us that they have a job, or they can tell us where they work and how much money they make. They can tell us that they just have investments, or they can tell us that they have a 401k, it's at Schwab, it's worth X number of dollars. So again, they can tell us as much or as little information as they want as a way of getting information into the system in advance of that first meeting. And as I mentioned, other ways of getting data into our system is using some of our integration partners. Again, some of these are both two-way, where we'll pull data, push to them as well. But it's a way of getting data, if you're on the wealth management side, to be able to push assets into Asset Map. So the next key feature is just the Asset Map report. So an Asset Map report, it's a visualization of someone's financial inventory, their financial closet. An Asset Map report can be built for any member or entity in a household, and they can be as simple as complex. Many of our users tell us Asset Map is one of the only tools that they have that shows everybody. So we can look at the kids, the mother-in-law, the business partner, the trust. But the visualization is set up the same way for everybody. The first thing it's going to start with is who's it for. So in this case, we have Tim and Christine, husband and wife. Upper left-hand corner, this is cash flows for Tim. Same thing for Christine over here. You'll notice some of these boxes are grayed out. Those are just future value income. So in this case, Tim's got Social Security. Christine's got an annuity. She's got her pension as a teacher and also Social Security as well. Any assets in Tim's name will be on the left-hand side. Same thing for Christine over here. Assets that are in her name are here. Anything jointly held is at the middle at the bottom. And then insurances are at the top. And a lot of our users tell us like one of the reasons they like Asset Map, it allows them to go wherever they want to focus on. If they want to focus on investments, they can go focus on these sides of the pages, or if they focus on insurance or tax, maybe you're looking at their income or looking at their beneficiaries to make sure they're taking advantage of the tax code with their beneficiaries on their retirement accounts. You can also build it, like I said, simple as complex. They have kids, they've got 529 plans. Or for those households that are taking care of the other generation, in this case, they've got the mother-in-law on here. And they also have a trust for their special needs son, Josh, as well. A little more complicated when we're starting to look at the business and the business partner to see the assets that are with the business, as well as the things that we have for the business partner. So again, asset map report, any member or entity, simple as complex it needs to be. And we cover everybody, not just the husband and wife or the family, entities, people, businesses, can be produced in an asset map report. Next key feature, stencils. So stencils, the analogy we like to use is think of it like Netflix, right? I log into Netflix. Netflix is going to tell me what movies and shows people like me may like. Stencils is the same concept. In this case, Christine, she's told us what her financial closet looks like. We dumped that out on the bed, we organized it. Now we're visually looking at it. You can then overlay a stencil. So we have some templated stencils. She's a teacher, so we have an educator stencil here. You can also custom build stencils. I actually ran into one of our users. He only works with air traffic controllers. So he has a stencil for air traffic controllers. He knows all the benefits they get from the government. But again, stencils will show other instruments people like them have. So in this case, Christine told me she had a SEP IRA. Hey, what about a traditional or a Roth IRA? She mentioned she had a whole life policy. We typically see people supplement that with term and or group term from their employer. So again, it's about building credibility. Hey, I work with people just like you. Here are some of the things that I also see them do. Also with Asset Map, we have our financial fire drills, or with 6 Ls. These are 6 events that could happen in someone's life that could impact them financially. And we just use some industry known calculations on what will trigger something red, yellow, or green. So green is good. Hey, based on our calculations, you seem to be okay there. Yellow is like, you got some, we might recommend doing something more with it. And red is, hey, this isn't represented on the asset map. Is this something we should look at right now? And we also be able to look at the financial fire drills across all of the clients in the business to see who's red, yellow, green on any one of those concepts. And then last key feature is target maps. This is where we start to drift into financial planning, it looks like. What's different about us? Our target maps, it's meant to be done quickly. I've heard the term, it's like tear sheet planning. It's both goals based and there's a cash flow report to supplement each one of the goals. But the idea here is to be able to do this quickly, okay? So I'll just run you through what it looks like. In this case, we're going to do a retirement funding. And we look at 3 things. The first thing we look at, what do they want? And typically what they want is usually set up as a configuration option by the user. So me, the advisor in this case. And I might make the assumption, hey, everybody do a retirement funding analysis. Let's just start with the base wants, and they're going to want 50% of their pre-retirement income in retirement. Let's carve out some money for travel in the early part of retirement. And then at some point, they likely need some medical expenses, and we'll carve out some money for medical expenses. So that's what they want. Again, that was configuration set up by me. The next thing we look at is what do you have? So what are the assets that we're going to earmark to fund this goal, in this case, retirement? And then we take what they have, and then we're going to put a straight line rate of return. Hey, Tim and Christine, what do you think we can get in the market net of fees? So in this case, I chose 5% based on what they want and what they have. If we get 5% in the market, they're going to be 77% of the way there. And the last thing we look at, what does it mean to them? If they're underfunded, we're going to tell them either save more, spend less, or retire later. And again, you can make these changes relatively quickly inside of target maps. And as I mentioned, there's a cash flow report for each one of the target maps to show how we're going to spend the money to fund that goal. Let me also just show you some of the things we just launched in the last, say, 3 or 4 months or so. First thing is just the client experience. So the ability to give someone access to their asset map or any of the additional reports out there that we provide. So additional reports could be something like a balance sheet or a beneficiary review. And they get view-only access. They create a login, be able to go in and see any types of reports that you have. The other thing we launched this year was just being able to white label the software. Everything from turning the software or putting a picture of your firm in the log when you log in, what it looks like. I showed you that discovery process, or I'll show you the discovery process. You can configure that. We also have the ability to add additional questions you might want to ask. Our discovery process is meant to ask questions that are relevant for asset map. You might want to send maybe a budget question to someone, a state checklist, or risk tolerance question for those of you in wealth management. And then also to put some templated goals as well, being able to do that. With that, I'm going to pivot over to the application. Give me 1 second here. And also, if you have any questions, you can just pop them into the chat. I'll pause every now and again to answer some of those questions. So first thing I'll show you, just real live in the system, is I talked about that discovery process. So again, the use case here is I'm coming in next week to meet with you. You just want to get a little bit of information from me in advance of the first meeting. So I could send them an email. There'll be a link in it. I can also just copy the link and just email it to them, or if you need to text it to them, however. Once I get the email, I can launch it. And this is what the experience looks like. Again, there's no login. It's all tied to my email address. I just want to get just some information from them in advance of the first meeting. So the first thing we want to know is just like, all right, who are the people? So I'm going to put myself on here. I'm also going to put my wife. I can also put my kids in here, but just for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to keep it to Gina and I. Well done. Let's get the relationships owner. Let's look at a picture of your finances. So first thing, all right, well, we both have jobs. We've got a house. We've got some loans. We have some investments. We do banking, and we have some insurance. I'm going to click continue. So I can just click next right there. That's all the information we need. Or if they want to be a little more specific, they can give us additional information. So I'm going to give some income information. So I work at Asset Map and I make $150,000 a year. And Gina is a doctor and she makes $225 a year. So I gave the income. I'm also going to add our house as well. We have a house. It's in Pennsylvania. It's worth $550. And we've also got a loan. It's at Chase. And we owe $350 on the house. So again, I gave you my income. I gave you my real estate, told you about my loans. I told you I had investments, banking, and insurance, but I'm just not going to give you additional information. I got to go pick up my kids. Something happened. So I'm going to hit continue. And the next thing we ask them is like, hey, anything else on your mind? Sure. I'm worried about retirement and I don't want to pay any taxes. Click continue. You can also free text here as well. And then we're done. When they finish it, you can have them land on this confetti screen, or a best practice, we can have them go to your website or to a calendar link to book a meeting. We can help you control that where you want them to land when they finish doing the discovery process. Once they finish the discovery, you'll get an alert in the application. You also get an email. So here's the alert. It's created. And here's the data I got from this household. So again, here's the information I gave you. I told you my income, gave Gina's income. I told you about a house and mortgage. I told you I had insurance, banking, and investments, but I didn't give you any additional information. So we just put a dollar placeholder there. I also told you I was worried about retirement and taxes. So we put to be determined. Again, we just put a dollar placeholder here there as well. Next thing you can do when you meet with them for the first time, you could overlay a stencil. So I'm going to overlay a stencil. And I'm just going to use one of our public ones. We've got some demographic stencils here. You can see executive, military. And I'm just going to use the generation. We're Generation X. I'm going to click on that. And when you apply the stencils, it's going to show other instruments people like my wife and I typically have. So Mike, you work at Asset Map. Do you have any other income? You do any consulting on the side, or do you have any rental income? Gina, you're a doctor at the hospital. Do you have a private practice? Are you planning on having a private practice? So again, you're able to ask those questions. And as I mentioned earlier, It's a good way to ask questions and it doesn't feel like an interrogation because the client knows like, hey, if we get this right, you're going to give this to me, regardless if we end up doing business together. You're going to get, so they have a takeaway, right? But it's a way of, again, just overlaying other instruments people like them have. We put a dollar placeholder there. We're not trying to offend anybody saying you should have X number of dollars in there. It's just something we want to talk about. So again, that would be onboarding a new client, what that first meeting could look like, leveraging stencils as well. I'll show you what it looks like when we actually have a client fully baked out here. So I'm going to look at the Franklin family. So again, here's the Franklin family. I've got Ben and Betsy here. I've got all of their assets here, their insurance, investments, any cash flows. I also have they have the mother-in-law. I actually have the mother-in-law's assets here as well. I've got their kids. I can see the kids' assets. They have a trust that was left over from Betsy's father. I can see the trust, the assets that are in the trust. And I could look at their business and their business partner here as well. Or if they also have an islet, I'd be able to look at the islet and see what's in the islet. So a couple things I can do right from here, just some of the features I shared with you. I can also just run signals. Again, we've got all their data in there. I click on signals. It's going to go over those 6 fire drills, see who's red, yellow, green. So in this case, fairly wealthy. It looks like they're okay with assets or they have enough insurance to cover things. Yellow is like maybe they have some disability, maybe they need more. And then legal liability, looks like they did have an islet, so they have some assets titled differently. Could others be titled differently? Should the house be in the trust? Things like that. But again, the goal there is just to quickly be able to identify these 6 fire drills. A couple other things I can do. Again, one of the things we get asked a lot is just collaboration. Some of these may just be in a tax practice. Maybe you don't have wealth management. We have the ability to add other professionals that are part of the family. So if you notice down here, I've got their CPA, their attorney, and also their loan officer at PNC. I could give access to the application to those professionals if they also had an asset map license. So if you're working jointly with clients where you do some referral business, you have the ability to do that where you can both work on the same clients as well. I mentioned target maps. So again, target maps, it's just a quickly way to be able to identify a goal or something that we need to make sure they're protected in. I'll show you what the retirement one will look like. I'm going to click on, let's just do retirement, and I'm going to do it for Ben and Betsy Ross. I'm in the live system. This might take a minute for it to load. And I know I see a question on there. I'll get to that question once I get through target maps in the chat as well. So again, retirement target map, it's meant to be done quickly. We look at 3 things. What do they want? What do they have? And what does it mean to them? So in this case, just on the base facts for Ben and Betsy, they're 49% funded. So what are my base facts? The first thing I look at is what do they want? So I configured that, hey, anyone we do a retirement analysis for, just assume they need 50% of their pre-retirement income in retirement, or 143,000. I also carved out some travel, and I did that 28,000 from 65 to 80. And then I also did medical expenses from 75 to 100. That's what they want. Then we look at what they have. These are the assets that I know that are earmarked to fund the goal. So in this case, I've got an annuity, I've got rental income. We're going to consider that some income they're going to use in retirement, their Social Security. And then I also have the retirement accounts that they have as well. Oh, let me include this annuity. I'd include that $30,000 annuity. Oh, you know what? That's Millie's. That's the mother-in-law. We don't want to include that. So in this case, I also, again, based on what they want and what they have, and I assumed a 5% rate of return, they're 49% of the way there. I can tinker with this and say, all right, what if we get 6% in the market? So if we get 6, we get a little more aggressive. That'll move it from 49 to 54. Or I'm just going to keep it at 5. The other thing I can do is change some of the assumptions. So my first assumption was that they needed 143,000. Well, could we do it on 120? And I can quickly update that. And if I go from 143 to 120, now it's got them at 56%. The other thing, they have a business that I didn't include in their retirement assets. So they have that business Flags R Us. Flags R Us is a valuation of 2.5 million. If I include that we sold the business to fund their retirement, again, I just check on that box. And now when I check on that box, now they're 122% funded. They also have kids, so maybe they want to sell the business to the kids at a discount. I could go in and change this and saying, hey, instead of 2.5, let's do 1.5. And if we sold it to the kids at 1.5 discount, I think it moves them, yeah, 95% there. So somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 million, we'd want to be able to sell the business. So in this case, they're going to be okay. And like I said, there's a cash flow report to show where we're taking the money, what we need, where we're taking it, and when we're taking it to show how we're going to spend that money in retirement. I'm just going to get to some of the questions that are on here. So first thing was like, how is the asset map updated? Do you need to link accounts? So the answer is both. If you look at an average asset map, now this is client is fairly wealthy. I'd probably put them in the not necessarily average client, but asset map, we have almost 2 million clients on the platform. On average, we see about 25 boxes on a husband and wife's asset map report. And on average, we can programmatically populate or update those accounts with eight. Eight of those boxes can be updated on a nightly basis. Because we're asking information that's not necessarily easy to update. So any of the cash flow stuff, that's usually have to be manually changed. Same thing, the housing stuff. Insurance is a bit of a mixed bag on what can we get programmatically populated. But the ways that we're getting data into our system, for those of you that use some of these tools that are in our integration partners. So these tools where we can get data, Adapar and Black Diamond are performance reporting tools. We can pull data from Nitrogen, Orion, Morningstar. For those of you using Redtail, we can pull data from Redtail. So if there's assets in there, we can pull from Redtail. If you're doing business with Charles Schwab, we can pull the data from Charles Schwab as well. So that's how we can update the asset map report programmatically. And when you're in an asset map report, oops, if I had an integration turned on, so right here, I've got integration enabled, I could just refresh. I don't have it enabled here. I could just refresh it and it would refresh all the assets that come in from Nitrogen on a nightly basis. Yeah, so the next question we have is, will the software help when dealing with wealth management clients? The answer is yes. I mean, that's primarily where we do our business, or those folks that are touching wealth management. So maybe you're managing money, maybe your primary business is accounting, but you have some wealth management business. That's mostly where our user base come from. But as I mentioned, we do have firms that use us that are strictly just CPA business. They like to be able to, they want to know everything about somebody. Also, from an accountant position, for an accountant, the beneficiaries is really important. A beneficiary report, seeing what assets they are, who the beneficiaries are, to make sure that they're taking advantage of whatever tax code, the tax code, so they could distribute those monies to the beneficiaries in an efficient manner. Again, if you still have questions, continue to pop them in there. Next thing we'll look at is just what the deliverables look like. So I'm going to show you what the asset map deliverables are going to look like. This is a demo client. I'm not going to include all the target maps that we've done for them. I'm going to include this one though. Loss of life. You can also include maybe a balance sheet. And I'll also include a beneficiary report. I'm going to click generate. Again, our goal with our deliverables, we try to keep everything to one page. Asset map report, one page. If you do a target map, we try to get that to one page. Again, the balance sheets typically can go more than one page, depending on how many assets they have. But we try to get everything to one page. And once this report gets generated, here's what it's going to look like. Again, cover page, we'd be able to put your logo on here. In this, I included their asset map report. For those of you in the compliance issues, we could put your custom disclosure on here on every one of the pages. I also included their signals that shows them the financial fire drills, where they're red, yellow, green. In this case, I included a loss of life target map we did for them, just something to show where they're funded and something were to happen. In this case, Ben. It was something, if something were to happen to Ben, looks like they'd be underfunded, talking about doing that. And then I also included in this just the balance sheet. So I've got balance sheet, 3 pages, and then again, the beneficiary report. Beneficiary, who's the interested party, and then who the beneficiary is and how much. So you can see the retirement account for Ben. The kids are 50-50 beneficiaries on his retirement account. And then on the last page here, we do have the ability to have a disclosure statement. Again, for those of you worrying about compliance, we can do a disclaimer on every page, and as well as include a disclosure report on the last page of it. Last couple things I'll show you inside of Asset Map. So again, I touched on adding different relationships. So adding other professionals and giving them access if you're doing joint work. Under our relationships tab, we also can do like a family tree. So in this case, I created a family tree to show, the hierarchy. So I have the first generation, I have the mother-in-law. They have a trust still available from Millie's husband, or in this case, it's also Betsy's father. So I can see those assets. Underneath in Ben and Betsy, the second generation, I've got their kids. I got William and Joan here as well. Betsy also has a business, Flags Are Us. Her business partner is Jeff Levy. And I can also see they have an ILIC created with typically the children or the beneficiaries in this case for the ILIC. Let me just pause there. Any other questions anyone may have had when we have, as I've been going through the application? Last couple things I'll touch on. I mentioned questionnaires. So the discovery process that I initially took you through, that's the initial conversation where we're asking things about the people, the assets, and any of their goals or what keeps them up at night. If you wanted, you could also ask them additional questions through our questionnaires. So these would be any questions you might want to ask of a client or prospect that's not really technically included in the asset map report. This was an idea that came from one of our enterprise partners. They use us for onboarding their clients, and they're in the financial institution space. They wanted to be able to get a risk tolerance questionnaire answered by their clients. And so they had an 8-question risk tolerance questionnaire. It was a fillable PDF. So we took their fillable PDF and we digitized it. So if you wanted to, you could ask additional questions. So the examples we have here is an RTQ, an estate planning checklist, or a budgeting worksheet. I'll just show you what this one looks like. This is the RTQ. And in this case, I think this one is 10 or 9 questions. So what's your investment attitude? Moderate. I'm just going to quickly answer these questions. Seven. This is my 8th question, 9th question, and then my 10th question. So they answered their risk tolerance question. When they go through that, we keep a history. So we'd be able to show, yeah, here's that RTQ was completed a few seconds ago. You'd be able to go and be able to view the responses. And you can send that out as many times as you want. You can send out multiple questionnaires to clients. In terms of next steps, if you're interested in taking a deeper dive into asset map, maybe there's questions that you didn't feel like asking during the group session, you could also go to our website. We actually have a relationship with the AICPA. If you're a PFP member, there's a 15% discount. Just AICPA members, we'd get a 10% discount. Where you'd go to asset-map.com/CPA to be able to go in there. You can see the pricing. You'd also be able to schedule a demo. The other promotion we have is right now for the end of the year, if you're interested in signing up for Asset Map, we'd still give you any of these discounts. We'd put an additional 15% discount on your software for the first year if you paid for the software annually. So you can pay monthly. If you paid annually, you can get an additional 15% off for the first year. And again, that promotion runs from today till the end of the year. And that's for those that pay annually as well. So with that, I'm going to just wait another minute, see if there's any additional questions. Fairly easy. Okay, perfect. Thank you guys for giving me time on a Friday afternoon. I'll give you some time back. I appreciate it. Have a great day. Oh, wait, hold on. There's 2 questions here. Oh, so one of the questions we have is, what if the husband and wife are not married, but both have community as well as separate assets? How we could answer your question, Jerry. We can do that. We can actually include, again, within the asset map, you're not limited to just putting people on there. If there's something that is jointly held, we would be able to separate that or represent it on an asset map. And the other question you had, Jerry, was estate planning. I know I said I was done, but I'm going to go back into the application. I'm sorry, Jerry, I didn't see your question there. For estate planning issues. Let me bring up a client that's got some estate issues. So the Doyle family, this is a high net worth family. So in this case, you can see a bunch of different people and entities here. They've got a revocable trust, an IDGIT, a GRAT, an ILET. What asset map can do is we can visually represent where those trusts are that you have implemented for estate planning purposes. What we don't do is validate why that they need it. We're not going to show like, hey, here's your current situation. If you move these assets into a trust, here's what's going to happen with your taxes in the event that you implement this technique. But we're able to visually show it. So in this case, I can show John here, John Doyle, if you notice in his cash flows, he's got a revocable trust kicking off $50,000 a year. I'm able to see that and I can see, oh, yep, that 58,000 is coming from the profit distributions off his private equity that he's done. Same thing for Maureen over here. I can visualize what we've done. So we've created an IDGIT for her with 3.3 million. I'm able to see what assets are in that IDGIT to be able to show where that they have what's inside that IDGIT. Or if I wanted to just isolate and look at not the husband and wife, I just wanted to look at Maureen's revocable trust. Oh, sorry, Maureen's IDGIT. So again, here are the assets that we have, and they also have a house in Ireland that's in there. For estate planning purposes, we can visualize it. We don't make the validation on why you're going to do that technique. That would be done in a traditional planning tool. And I showed you the relationship piece as well. I don't think I've done it for this client, no. But I could show where those assets are going. If I were to do, I'm going to add, oops, sorry. I could show a flow chart here where I could take the revocable trust. I could show what assets are in here and then where those assets are going. I didn't do it for this client. I'm happy to show it. If you want to, Jerry, we can set up a demo and I can build this out for you to show what would happen with this revocable trust, what assets in it, and then where do those assets go in the event that something happens to John. So that would be our estate planning techniques as well. Let me pause one more time. Any other questions I had here? Perfect. And let me check the chat as well. Perfect. Okay. Thank you again for joining on a Friday. Like I said, if you're interested, the place you want to go, I'll bring that up one more time. asset-map.com/CPA. Again, right now, 15% for PFP members. Everyone else will get a 10% discount. Additional promotion if you pay annually, add another 15% discount for the first year. Perfect. Well, again, I'll stay on. If anyone has any questions, I'll be able to answer questions. Other than that, I'll give you back 20 minutes of your day. Hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks for coming.